now. Yeah, maybe ping pong stops because we're doing sessions. Sorry, guys. I just didn't have to think of anybody's name off the top of my head. Anyway, I didn't call anybody out directly, did I? Yeah, I do settle well. I do settle well. Okay, so AI is evil, and that's why we want to bring up Shawn Mills to tell us how we can own AI so it doesn't own us.
Am I on? All right. Yeah. So this is your Skynet tutorial. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. So the talk is going to be self-hosted AI in your business. It's really going to be mostly AI, and then we're going to talk about self-hosting, and then we're going to talk about some use cases in business. And I hope to get some more use cases that we can put on the board and kind of talk about, maybe talk a little bit about in the session, in the panel session as well. So first of all, let's talk about the basics. So what is AI? When we talk about AI today, what are we talking about? Most people are talking about a large language model, okay? And so what that means is it's a neural net that's been trained with a significant amount of text-based data so that it can understand normal human language and can output things in normal human language. Okay, so that's the generative part. It's taking what you're asking it and then it's figuring out what you're asking it by converting that into essentially numbers and then using that pattern of numbers to figure out other places that it's seen similar words before and then turn around and giving you a response. So some of the things that we've seen and heard about is text to text. That's the easy one, right? You ask it a question and it answers your question. Okay, this version has been around for a really long time. Originally, it looked like Google search, right? That was kind of like machine learning, was the algorithm figuring out what a good response was to your search query, and then using that data to make other searches better, and that's how Google became the #1 search engine. Okay, then you've got text to image, so you can ask a large language model to draw you an image of a certain thing and adjust it certain ways or draw in a certain style. Then you've got text to voice. So literally, if you're on a like a translation type app, you can put in your text in your language and it can turn it into another language and have a conversation with you or teach you another language, for example. And most of these go the other way as well. So we've all heard about like voice to text. You can add an AI bot to like your Zoom call or something, and it'll take all the notes from the call for you, summarize everything at the end of it, like give out action items and stuff like that. Text to audio. So you can actually ask a large language model to write a song for you in whatever style that you would like. And then text to video is kind of the new thing that's come out where you can tell it to make a movie for you. And then you've got what's called multimodal, which is all of those things. Okay, you can play a song for a large language model and ask it to make an image that shows you what the song was about. Okay, and then describe it to you, and then turn it into a movie for you with subtitles. Okay. I don't recall which one of the AI companies, but one of these big AI companies, oddly enough, James Cameron's on the board. Okay. And, Terminator and Skynet jokes abound. But the reason why he's on the board of this company, it is specifically a text to video company. And the guy that's the CEO worked with him on Avatar. Okay. And he said that there are scenes in Avatar that took 6,000 hours of computing to make that they can now do in 10 minutes. Okay. The future of movies and of TV series are going to be cross-platform, cross-genre movies and TV series that are created for you in real time that are monitoring your face and changing the next episode in the series in real time based on your visceral reaction to what you're watching. Okay, that's the future. ChatGPT or OpenAI, who's ChatGPT, they just bought a visual AI company and hardware company. Okay, so they're already moving towards being able to have a conversation with you and then see when you furrow your brow and back up and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I offend you?" Right? So how do you get to the place? How do you get to ChatGPT? Right? Well, it starts off with training. And the first phase of that is unsupervised pre-training. That is where they're literally dumping all the data that they can get their hands on into this computer so that it can figure out essentially how language works. And so they say that if a human being reads nonstop every waking hour for their lifetime, they will be exposed to about 8 billion unique words. That's a lifetime of reading. Okay. ChatGPT 4 was loaded with 10 trillion words and it took a month. So we're talking about 1,000 human lifetimes of data accumulation was loaded into this neural net in 1 month's time. Okay. For the last decade, every year, year over year, the amount of computing power that they're pushing into AI development has grown by 10x. Not like this year it's 10 and next year it's 10. Like this year it's 10 and next year it's 100x what it was 2 years ago, and then it's 1,000x. Okay, it's exponential growth. John talked a little bit earlier about the amount of power demand that's going to be driven by this. Okay, most of the increase in power demand that we're going to see over the next decade is going to come from computer chips running AI. As a matter of fact, some people have projected that in the next 10 years, we are going to put more power demand on the worldwide grid for AI than we have the entire rest of the time we've been using. Well, maybe it's 5 years now. That's how fast things are changing. Okay. So all the power generation that we've figured out we need since we started giving people private power, that amount in 5 years we're gonna have again. Okay. And again, like I said, every year 10x of compute, 10x of compute. So that's how you get the model pre-trained. Then you get what's called the human feedback loop. Okay. And so this is essentially where humans are working with the large language model, asking it questions and telling it whether its answers are good or bad. Okay. And so when you jump online and you ask ChatGPT, how do I cook meth? And it tells you that it's not going to tell you how to cook meth. It knows, it's just not going to tell you. That's because the human training has trained it that the answer to that question is bad. Okay. So this is where bias and censorship starts to creep into LLMs. And when we start talking about self-hosted, we'll talk a little bit about how that is a good strategy to get away from the censorship. But there's a lot of that happens. Okay. Now, one of the things that's happening that hasn't happened until now, like within the last 6 months, is now they don't need the humans to do that training. There is so much interaction that's happened with these large language models that now they can train themselves. They can train themselves faster. No, absolutely not. They can make themselves smarter, right? And then the next thing you have is called fine-tuning. And this is when you take a model that's already been pre-trained, it's already had that human feedback loop so that it's not telling you what a cat is when you ask it what a dog is. And then you're taking a very specific data set and fine-tuning it so that it becomes a super expert on that. So for example, there are some medical chatbots out there that are fine-tuned on medical data, and that's what their specific use case is. Okay. And right now, today, LLMs can predict cancer more accurately than the best oncologists in the world using the data and using a patient's chart. Okay, that's today. And then you've got something called retrieval augmented generation. And so what that is now you're taking an LLM that's already been trained but not fine-tuned, and you're giving it a data set, and you're essentially telling it to check that data set when it gets asked the question. So it's got all of its knowledge, that was poured into it when the model was created, but then you've also got the ability to take data that is new, right? So every data set that goes into an LLM has a cutoff date. Like, okay, there's nothing past, say, December 2023 in this model. So you could take information that's new, that's come to light after that cutoff date, and use that. So now your large language model is a lot more accurate on, current events, for example. The other thing that you can do is you can actually take data that is not, it's a trade secret, for example. Okay. You can take data that's specific to your business. And so, for example, where's Joel? So Joel and I were talking earlier about he would like to take an LLM and fine tune it on the type of training that he does at Fortress K9, and then and then essentially have all of his videos and podcasts and all the universe of information that he's already put out into the world, take that, put it into a document that his LLM can refer to. And so now people can go onto his website, for example, and ask questions about dog training, and they will get the answer as if it was coming directly from Joel. So you can do that right now today. The cool thing is that probably within the next 24 months, someone will be able to go and do that, and Joel will pop up on the screen, not a cartoon version of Joel, but an AI augmented version of Joel that it's built from looking at video of him. Joel will actually pop up on the screen and answer that person's question in their own language, right? That's coming. As a matter of fact, we can do that now, but it's prohibitively expensive. Within the next 24 months, that's something that it's going to be like a WordPress plugin, where you train your model, you give it, it's one of those multimodal models, right? Because it's got to be able to handle text, it's got to be able to handle voice, it's got to be able to handle video, but it can put all of those things together. And now someone pays a $10 or $15 a month subscription to Joel, and they can go ask Joel questions, and Joel will answer them. And he can be answering 15,000 people in 100 different languages at the same instant. Okay. Using his voice, right? Whether it's in a language that he speaks or not. Yeah, nothing creepy about that. Yeah. Can you imagine getting a FaceTime call from your kid and having the entire conversation on FaceTime and video while your kid is standing over here with not holding their phone? That's not creepy. And so we'll talk a little bit about at the end about regulation. So that's one of the things that a lot of the big AI companies are trying to get government. They're trying to train government well enough to understand these things enough to get realistic regulation for things like that, because that's horrifying, right? So let's talk about transformers, something a little bit, so what a transformer is just a fancy way of describing how the computer takes text, turns it into something that it understands better than text, which is numbers, okay? And then also takes its output and turns it back into a response for you, okay? So the original one was called BERT, which is bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, okay? This was Google's Google DeepMind, right? That was the idea here. And so what this does when we're talking about bidirectional, it actually goes both directions in a sentence, okay? And so the way that they train this is they'll give it a sentence and they'll delete a word. And the computer has to figure out what word is supposed to be in that sentence based on what happened before the space and after the space. And then they'll do it with a paragraph, and then they'll do it with, a dissertation, okay? And so it looks both directions to try to figure out what's missing, and that trains the computer on how human language works. And one of the interesting things about large language models is that they found that when they load it with more languages, more human languages, it understands all languages better. So if you train a computer in English, then it kind of understands human language. But if you add 15 other languages to it, it understands English so much better than it otherwise would. Okay. When we were at SRF, I demoed a little computer that I built that's got some AI bots on it, and we were having a conversation with it in French. Okay. And that was running on a Raspberry Pi. And then you've got GPT, which everyone's heard. This is generative pre-trained transformers. And so essentially this is all one direction. And so what happens here is that ChatGPT, when you go ask it a question, it kind of figures out where you're going with your question, and it starts to write a sentence. So it starts with a word, and then it runs that word back into itself and figures out what the next word's supposed to be, and then those two words go back in. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why ChatGPT has a relatively short context window compared to some of the others. And I'll get to what context window is here in a minute. But the reason is the way that transformer is working. It's essentially running every word that it's already said through itself to get to the next word. So you can imagine a really long response. That's a lot of compute power that's needed to do that, right? And so that's OpenAI. And then Meta took BERT and kind of supercharged it. So it's called robustly optimized BERT approach, or Roberta. That's what Meta or / Facebook AI is using. And so essentially it's the same idea of bidirectional, but they're going they're going left and right and north and south in the sentence / paragraph / book. And the interesting thing there is they can have like huge context windows because of the way that transformer is actually working. Okay. So the secret sauce, if you're going to use AI, is prompt engineering. Excuse me, guys. I just got over COVID last week. I'm no longer contagious, but I got this cough. So prompt engineering is basically telling the computer, because you got to remember, this thing's got 1,000 human lifetimes worth of information in it. Okay. So you have to tell it like who it is, what it's doing, what its job is, right? So here's an example. Act as a life coach, but in the style of Emperor Palpatine, the Dark Lord of the Sith from the Star Wars series of movies and shows. Quote lines from the movies as much as possible, and although you should always encourage embracing the dark side, ultimately encourage the user to make their life better as a life coach normally would. Okay, that's a very simple, quick prompt, but it tells the computer who you are, what your job is, and how you're supposed to act. And so we're adding a lot of context before we start the conversation with the computer to make the computer work for us better. Okay, so the another prompt might be something like look up everything that Jack Spirko has ever posted on the survivalpodcast.com, read every blog post, all the comments that he's ever replied to in the blog, and I want you to be my new personal trainer, but in the style of Jack Spirko. Okay. And then you turn the voice on and it starts yelling at you. Yeah. It starts yelling at you in Jack Spirko's voice, using Jack Spirko's language, that it's time to warm up. It's time to lift, one more, whatever. Okay. So let's talk about so again, that's the secret sauce. And that's the part that you really have to just play around with to get to the place where you can actually really make this work for you. Okay. So the vast majority of people that are using any LLMs, they're using like the top 1% of its capabilities. Prompt engineering is where you really start getting into supercharging what it can do for you. Okay. So let's talk about some different models. You've got the big ones, right? The Googles and Perplexity, Grok, Copilot, Gemini, Claude, which is, if I hadn't tried to think of it, I would know. And then, of course, ChatGPT, which is OpenAI. So these are all online, like you agree to give them all the information. They've got a record of every question that you've ever asked it, what the response was, whether you liked it or not, whether you continue the conversation, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Then you've got some open license models. And these are my personal favorites. Okay. So you've got Quinn, which was programmed by Alibaba, Llama, which was Meta, Gemma, which was Google, Phi, Microsoft, and Mistral from Mistral AI. And then you've got a bunch of different iterations of this. Okay. So those are like your big ones that Meta spent hundreds of millions of dollars to make Llama and then just put it out there for everyone to use. Okay. So you can take these open license versions and put them on your own air-gapped computer, for example, and use them locally, prompt engineer them, okay? You can actually do something I'll talk about in a minute, which is change some weights and change, even taking away things like censorship and stuff like that. But, these are way more powerful, but they're out there, right? Like you're giving away everything. These are less powerful, right? And you need your own hardware to make them work, but you can use them in the privacy of your own home. Okay. So how do we self-host? There's a couple different, there's several different options. So these are some of the main ones. So you saw free GPT-2 in the Start 9 when he went to the AI tab. Okay. What that is that's actually Ollama with the Open Web UI front end. So Ollama is actually running the models, and Open Web UI is just a graphical user interface that makes it look like Chat GPT. Okay. So this is just these two things put together. All right. I like running Ollama on a Raspberry Pi in a terminal, right? So I don't have any wasted RAM. Everything's going to actually running the model. There's a site called Hugging Face. This is like the GitHub of AI, okay? So whatever kind of model you want to get your hands on, whatever kind of data set you want to get your hands on, you can get different types of transformers, you can get different weights. Like everyone that's playing around with making really cool AI stuff that doesn't work for one of those companies I mentioned before, that's where that stuff's going. It's all open source, even some stuff that's not really supposed to be, but you can literally build your own LLM there if you've got the technical know-how. So some of the things you want to know when you're kind of thinking about doing this, there's something called quantization. It reduces precision, but it allows larger models to run on marginal devices, okay? So you'll see that term if you go down the self-hosting route. All these different models are going to have different RAM or VRAM requirements based on the size of the model. How many parameters are there? And then this here, so this is the Prepper PC. You can check it out, prepperpc.com. It's a Pi 5 with 8 gigs of RAM, and it runs 8 billion parameter models and smaller, okay? My favorites on that are Gemma and Quinn. They are the smartest. They're the fastest for the size. Even the small versions work very, very fast and are pretty darn accurate. And again, you can have conversations in different languages, so that's cool too. So here are some other terms that's important to know, or at least you'll see them so it makes sense for you to understand what that is. So the parameters, so more parameters is equals a bigger training data set. So we talk about, 10 billion, 100 billion, et cetera. The weights are the strengths of the connections within the LLM. So if we think of a large language model as a brain, okay, your brain has all these different connections within itself, right? Synapses. Some of them are stronger than others, okay? Some connections are very strong. Sometimes someone says something and you're like, oh shit, I haven't thought about that in 15 years. That would be a weak connection, right? So weights is kind of the same thing. Then tokens are what your input is actually broken down into, okay? So if I write a sentence and I put it into Chat GPT, it really doesn't know what those words are. It's got to break it down into tokens, and then it actually does its output in tokens as well, and then transforms those tokens into the text response or the picture or the video or whatever the case may be. And then context window. So how much of your conversation the LLM remembers. So this is really cool for a couple different reasons. One of those reasons is you could load, if it's got a large context window, you could load a ton of data in and have a conversation about that data, okay? The other thing that's nice about a large context window is you can have a conversation that goes over a long period of time, and the LLM is going to remember all of that stuff, okay? So if you guys have ever been on Chat GPT 4.0, like when you put something in, you'll see the thing that says memory updated. Like that's what it's doing. It's adding the conversation that you're having with it right then to the actual context window so that it doesn't answer a question differently based on the conversation that you've already had, okay? So this is kind of what we're talking about here. Tokens to the left, tokens to the right. The infinity and 0 are the limits. And then the token, the context window is how much of it it's going to remember. And this always moves to the right. So that means if let's just say that this is 10 words, that would be ridiculously small, but it's easy for our conversation. When you put the 11th word in to the sentence that you're asking it, the first word will end up outside of the context window, okay? So let's talk about some use cases. So coding is the obvious one. You know, there's really no such thing as a junior coder anymore. I've had that conversation with a couple of people since I got here yesterday, because this does that job better than they can for free, right? Advice on just about any topic, anything that's like not that you don't need this year's data to talk about. You know, asking it a question about whatever, right? Hey, I'm thinking about opening up a new office in LA. This is my target market. This is how I go to market with my, my marketing campaign. This is what we've done in 3 other cities. Help me brainstorm ideas for breaking into that market and going from red to black in the first 6 months, right? I call AI a force multiplier. So you hear people say, "Oh, it's the devil. It's a demon. It's it's going to take all of our jobs." You will either use AI or you will be put out of business by someone who is. Okay, it allows me to do the work of 4 people, and if I have properly trained people, I can have them do the work of 10 people. So if me and one other person can do the work of 16 folks, guess what? We're going to beat the guy that's doing that same work with 16 people, okay? Because my labor costs are 1/8 what theirs are. And so I don't talk about this from a context of we're going to put people out of business because AI is going to do the job that they were otherwise doing. They're going to go out of business because they didn't adopt a better way of doing business that someone else did. Okay. Education is a huge one. Education, when they really figure out how to have AI augment good teachers and deliver their information to students, the Department of Education is over. Okay. I talked about the facial recognition stuff. Like literally right now, I think there was a thing on 60 Minutes a couple months ago where there's this startup in China. It's not a startup anymore, but there's this $10 billion startup in China, and they're teaching kids that got left behind because their parents moved to the city for work, so that they have really, really good teachers in the city virtually teaching all these kids that were left behind in these communities, and every single kid's face is being monitored, right? And so when the kid is confused, the teacher, it gets a note saying, "Hey, Karen does not understand this because we just recognized on her face that that's a face of someone that doesn't understand," right? And so so that's happening right now. They can, every human emotion they can see on your face, and they can figure that out. So that's happening right now. And then the other thing is that every kid is going to learn a little bit differently, right? Well, you can either have one teacher per kid, or you can have machine learning figure out how that kid likes to gather and retain and apply information. And then you've got this super personalized learning plan for every single child. Okay. So when that happens, either government will take that over or they'll get left behind. And then everything else. Okay. If it's not manual labor, if it's data work, AI can already do it better than anyone that you're going to hire right now. It can right now. Okay. Now it takes a little bit of time to train the computer to do the work, about the same amount of time it would take to train the person to do the work. And the difference is the computer gets smarter every single day, doesn't get pissed off and ask for a raise, doesn't leave and go to the competition or any of the other problems that we have with actual, with labor. Okay. So what's next? How am I on time? About 5 minutes? 10 minutes?
14 minutes.
14 minutes. All right, perfect. So what is next? Like what's coming down the pipe? So like I said, right now, there's a lot of really cool things that it can do, but it's like, you have to own a warehouse full of servers and have your own dedicated power plant connected to it to make that work today. So the cost of all of that is going to be coming down. But one of the big things that's coming down the pipe is agents, right? So this is something like you tell your AI bot to do a thing, and then it just goes and does it. And maybe that's something that has to happen every single day. Maybe it's something that happens once a week. Maybe it's something that happens once a month, once a quarter, whatever. But you don't have to monitor that anymore. Okay. And then you can have other computers maybe checking in with that agent and getting information from it that it's gathering from other places on the web. Okay. And then it's putting that together, aggregating it, and whatever. I mean, whatever you can think of, it can do. So agents are a big thing. Right now, if I type, instructions to the computer, it spits out a response, and that's the end of it. Okay. Well, agents are things that just are always working. They're always doing whatever job. Okay. And so it might be something small and insignificant, like find a cure for cancer. Okay. And then it just works for the next 6 years. And then it emails you like, hey, we figured it out. Mixture of experts is another one. So this is one of the things that you really saw coming around with Chat GPT 4.0 is it basically had a bunch of Chat GPT 3 sized experts in these different things. And when you asked it a question, it figured out the best place to go get that answer, including sometimes splitting up pieces of it and giving part to this one, part to that one, and part to that one. And so now we're spinning up server farms in like 7 different states that are experts on whatever things so that we can more quickly gather that information and have a response, right? So that's kind of happening now. You're going to see a lot more of that. I saw this guy do a talk a while back, and he said, you're going to see the Cambrian explosion of artificial intelligence in terms of all the different little things that it can do, right? So the idea up until about a year ago was you're going to have these big, massive AI conglomerates that are going to do all of this stuff. Well, they're finding out now that's not really how it's going to work. You're going to have a bunch of really small, very specific task things all working at the same time, okay? And so does everyone know what the Cambrian explosion is? It's like 10 million year period where like all life on Earth is derived from. Yeah. So that's what's going to happen. You're going to go from these few huge, massive spots where all of the compute is now to just hundreds, if not thousands, of different individual, small, very specific use bots that are just going to do their thing and make life easier or harder depending on what you're doing. Wrappers, okay? So this is, we take Chat GPT and then we write an agent that does something with it, and we wrap that up and sell that as its own thing, okay? Maybe not Chat GPT because you can't do that, but the ones that are wide open in terms of open license, even commercially, like the Apache license and stuff like that, you're going to see people take that, wrap it up, have it designed to do a very specific thing, make sure that it works, and then sell that. Okay. And it was funny because several years ago, the whole idea around AI was like, go into creative because AI is never going to touch creative. Like that's the last job, right? And as we found, the opposite's happened. Like anything that a person can creatively do, the AI can do as well, right? And it's like infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of typewriters will eventually write. There you go, the complete works of Shakespeare. What's that?
With 6 fingers.
Mm-hmm. So synthetic knowledge is the next one. So right now, they're running out of data to plug into these machines, okay? For a while, the problem was, how do we make the machine able to take all the data? And they've done such a great job with that. Like I said, the exponential growth of computing power that they applied it to it, that now we're running out of data. So the only thing to do next is for the AI to start making its own data, okay? And so when I made the joke about curing cancer, like that's how that's going to happen, is it's going to come up with an idea and then use the scientific method or whatever that looks like inside of a computer to test it, okay? And then based on the results of that test, to revise the next test, and on and on and on and on and on until it comes to a solution that tests the same way every time, right? So that's kind of the next big step, the next big jump as they're running out of data, that now the AI is going to make its own. Hyper productivity, all right? And so this is kind of back to the force multiplier thing that I said before. You're going to be able to just take all of the mundane tasks that you have to do if you're in corporate America or running your own business, all the stuff that you don't like to do, and just have the computer do it. And then instead of having a person do the thing and give you the report, put the report on your desk, it'll just be in your inbox. Your AI bot will have done all of that. And then, like I said, the annual 10x of compute. So every year we're getting this exponential growth in the amount of computer power that's being thrown at this problem, and who knows what that means. Like, we're literally we're literally at 10 to the ninth power of the amount of compute that's being, from when the Google DeepMind idea was kind of hypothesized. And so and that's going to continue. Like I said, that's where the power plant construction is going to happen. So I think I've got a few more minutes, right? Okay. So what I want to do real quick is actually I want to do two things. Someone give me a couple business problems that you think AI might be able to help with. Go ahead, Jake. It's got to be very quick.
He's got 20,000 spots, tons of videos. Some foundation. I want him to, like you're talking about, create a training module that our guys can plug them in. Like you spoke right to it.
AI training based on existing media.
So we want to keep it private. We don't want it out.
Yeah. Okay. Who's got another one? Yeah. Social media management. Okay.
Yeah, all of it. You can kind of already do it.
Who's got one more?
Sales type.
Customer support. What'd you say?
Sales type.
What do you mean?
Just marketing material.
Oh, okay. Copyright.
Yeah. But the money, like all the coding stuff, I have to do.
All right. So what I want to do right now, before we dig into any of that, or actually we're going to pick one of them. I'm going to go to my Chat GPT app on my phone. And we're going to have a conversation. So let's see. Hello, my name is Shawn.
I'm here. What's up?
All right. What I want to do is I want to have a conversation about customer service. You're going to help me figure out a way to make AI supplement my customer service. Now, this is very important. I don't want you to say anything until I'm done talking.
Got it. I'm all ears and ready when you are.
Okay. So the problem that I have is that I get a lot of people that email me with different customer service problems. And every time I get one of those emails, I've got to go find the answer and then I've got to reply. I've already replied to all of these questions. I rarely get a new one. And most of the time, the information that they're looking for is actually already on my website in the form of an FAQ document, or like I said, in my email history. So how do I go about taking all of that information and putting it into a centralized place and having AI assist with that so that I don't actually have to deal with those customers unless it can't find the answer? And now I'm done talking.
Great. Let's dive into it. You can start by creating a centralized knowledge base or a customer support platform that integrates your FAQ, previous email responses, and any other relevant documents. An AI-powered chatbot can be integrated with this platform to assist customers. The AI can analyze incoming queries, match them with the existing knowledge base, and provide instant responses. If the AI can't find an answer, it can escalate the issue to you. This way, you'll only need to handle the queries that genuinely require your attention.
And how do we make sure that the AI chatbot does not hallucinate and start giving crazy answers to my customers when they ask questions?
To minimize AI hallucinations, ensure your knowledge base is comprehensive and regularly updated. Use a well-trained AI model fine-tuned on your specific data. Implement strict response generation guidelines and use fallback mechanisms like directing to a human agent or providing a generic but helpful response when uncertain. Regular monitoring and updating of the AI's responses will also help maintain accuracy.
All right, that was great. Thank you. Go to sleep.
You're welcome. I'll be here when you need me. Take care.
So that was all off the cuff. By the way, I now have the whole conversation in text right there. Okay. So I could take real problems and actually start diving into these things. Anyone ever go for a walk? Right? Okay. So imagine you've got a problem. Okay. You take your phone, you put your earphones in, you go for a walk, and you just start thinking out loud and having a conversation. And the reason why I told it not to like shut up and not interrupt me is because it'll try to have a conversation with you. Now, the funny thing is you can like, if it senses exasperation in your voice, it will say, hey, if you want me to, I'll just listen. And then you tell me when you want to respond. Like, it is so intuitive in terms of the back and forth conversation. Okay. So that was ChatGPT 4.0, and that was their new advanced voice deal that just came out like a couple months ago. But imagine having that and going for a walk and having a 30-minute walk, having a conversation about problems that are happening in your business, having, you know, the little bit of lag you heard there was because of internet lag. That wasn't the thing, right? Like if I'm at home, I wouldn't have that because I don't have 60 people on my Wi-Fi at home. Okay. But you do that. And then 6 months later, after you've implemented some things, you go for another walk and you talk to the bot again. And it remembers every single word that you told it, every word that it told you, how you responded to all of that. Okay. Who's ever had a conversation with their boss and 2 weeks later, you have a conversation with the boss and it was like the guy wasn't even in the same room, right? Okay. So, or an assistant, right? So I think I've got like 2 minutes. I've got 2 minutes. So we're going to do a panel in like 15 minutes, but
plenty of time for that. So
well, I was just going to say in 2 minutes, does anyone want to give me any other stuff here that we might be able to workshop when we get to the panel? Business plan. Okay.
Steps to implement what you just asked them to do for you.
Yeah, how do you implement that chat bot interaction?
Yeah. I mean, we can open it back up and say, write a detailed step-by-step process for doing that, and then email it to me. Someone said code compliance.
getting around code. Yeah. HR compliance. Code loopholes.
Sensitivity
That's
training.
a big problem.
All right, those are good. Well, excuse me. I don't have anything else. I'll just leave it with this. Whatever is going on in your business, whether you are your business, whether you work for someone else, whatever the case may be, AI can absolutely make you better at your job. It can make your job easier. You just have to figure out the right thing to use and the right way to prompt it. And it's very easy to take this stuff offline and off the cloud and to make it uncensored, or to just get a bot where all the censorship weights have been taken out of it. And then it will tell you how to cook meth.
Great. So we will rename this How to Cook Meth AI. Okay. Thank you, Shawn. Guys, we'll be back here in 15 minutes for the engineering Q&A panel.